Welcome back, book nerds. This is Library Card, the show for people who want to think deeply about the books they read and get inspired to read more. I'm Megan Gliona. I'm here with Brian Brinkman and RJB. RJB is not only on a literary podcast with us, but he also has a short story that was published this week. RJ, tell us about Temple Street and congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks. I received word that we were going to be discussing it on this podcast, so I need to get ready for all of your hard questions and feedback and potential post-publication edits and the problems that you had with it and other things. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's a very small literary magazine, but I'm very grateful to them for including it in the fall edition. I talked to you guys about this story when I was thinking about it because I kind of was thinking about, well, I don't know, maybe I'll wait to go into how I kind of started thinking about it. But it started with a text thread that the three of us were on about kind of like conversations that people would have with, like with God, maybe as before they went into heaven was kind of like where it started. Remember that conversation? Which is just like it's just kind of crazy that that's where it started. It turned into something totally different, but yeah, I'm excited to have it out there, and yeah, it's so fun to see people like, just to hear people's feedback and to hear people enjoying something like that. It's just like, making a podcast or doing anything else. It's like it's cool to have people like appreciate art.
That's amazing. When did you start writing fiction?
December of last year.
Okay, that's just incredible.
You've been on a tear ever since then.
You've been writing like crazy. Yeah, it's really thrilling. It's exciting to watch and share it with you. And I'm excited because we've never had an author on Library Card. So this is exciting to talk to an actual author next week.
Yeah, it's really great. You guys are going to have to start going through my agent, soon to get me on the podcast. Yeah. But that's fine. I'll always prioritize you guys,
Oh, thanks. That's good. That's good. Once our group text chain stops including you, we'll know that the switchover has been made. And,
yeah, exactly. No, thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're excited for you, and we're really excited to dig into it next week. So we'll make sure that people see it and can get a chance to read it before our episode.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Brian, what are you reading right now?
I am finishing up. I've got 40 pages left of Comanche Moon, Larry McMurtry's prequel to Lonesome Dove, which covers Gus and Call in their 30s, I want to say, into their 40s. Kind of like a 20-year period in time where they are rangers in Texas, and what's happening in American history at that point in time, what the Civil War did to settlements in the prairie, the wars with native tribes, plus the heartache at the core of Augustus McCrae's life, in the form of his love Clara. I'm reading that. I'm also finishing Little Devil in America, which explores Black artists in the late 19th century through the 20th century and how they are perceived and interpreted by predominantly white audiences and what it says about American culture. It's the second Hanif Abdurraqib book I've read. It's fantastic. He's such a beautiful, poetic writer, and he gets really to the heart of complex issues in America in just a profound way, very poetic, very honest, very brutal. And then I just started last night, Emperor of Rome, Mary Beard's history of Roman Empire emperors and the impact of switching from a republic to an empire in Rome, what that impact had on the citizenry, what it says about the history of autocracy and how autocracy can take over a society, and what the emperors accomplished and how they ultimately lost the Roman Empire. So I'm always in the midst of 3 different books. That's the rhythm, that's the routine, and that's where we're at right now.
Seems like very relevant, topical information that you're reading about right now. That's cool.
Doing my best.
How about you, RJ? What are you reading when you're not writing short stories and novels and other exciting things like that?
I am almost done with a book called Twist, which is a new book by Colin McCann, who wrote Let the Great World Spin. Do you guys read that book?
Oh, I
Like
didn't. No.
it's really good. I really loved it, so I wanted to check out the new one. It's about a guy who's reporting on a ship that goes out to sea to repair like the big internet cable that runs across the ocean floor. But it's like it's a
Mm.
novel, but it's like it's kind of an interesting premise, and I've always liked his books, so I'm almost done with that.
Nice. Yeah, I've never read any of him.
Let the
I
Great
should
World
do
Spin
that.
is fun.
Okay.
I'm adding
I'll
that
put
to
it
my
on my
list.
list. Yeah, I'll put it on mine too. Well, I'm in the middle of 2 books, which is very unlike me. But I'm rereading a book that's actually written by RJB as well. I'm rereading Bill, your fiction novel that you wrote. And it's really fun to see how it's changed since the first time. And I'm really excited to talk about that with you guys after. But the other book that I just finished is The Topeka School by Ben Lerner. And I've been reading a lot of Lerner's poetry, and this was my first time reading his novel, a novel of his. And I started this book a few years ago, and I finally picked it back up again. And it's a story of 2 teenage boys and one of the boys' parents who are therapists. And the story's chapters, they rotate between the 4 main characters' perspectives. I don't know, I think Lerner's a fascinating writer. He's incredibly smart, and I think his ability to play with form and flirt with breaking the fourth wall and weave thematic threads through his stories are all things that I'm just in awe of. And that is true when I read his prose or his poetry. But he also challenges me in a lot of ways. And some ways I enjoy and some ways I don't. But I'm learning a lot from reading him. I know you both read Lerner before. I don't know if you have thoughts similarly about him or insight to help me understand him better.
Topeka School was the first book I read of his, and I had a similar experience to you. I started it in early 2020 on a recommendation from a very close friend, and I think I put it down after 90 pages. I was just like, I didn't know where the story was going. I didn't really see like a. I liked parts of it, but I didn't find that like it had enough emotionally there for me to stay with it. And then I picked it back up because a couple months later the pandemic was upon us, and I was just like, well, I should probably just read a ton more during this period of time. And I ended up finding the conclusions of that book, um, in terms of debate, dialogue, discourse, what it means to speak like or as a man, had like
Hmm.
really interesting impacts in terms of where we were at in the late 2010s, early 2020s. I'd be very curious to read the book again now, but I just read his semi-autobiography, Leaving the Atocha Station, which he wrote about his time in Madrid in 2005, which coincided with the Madrid train station bombing. I found that to be much more approachable and much more enjoyable, but not as deep and not as like full of fascinating American political revelations. So I'm a
Mm.
little like I'm a little torn with Lerner.
Yeah.
I really he's a very impressive writer, but I've never found like from an emotional standpoint, I've been pulled into his books in a way that I'm like, I have to read the next one.
Yeah, that was a little bit of mine. I felt emotionally a little distant from it, but I would love to get into a larger conversation about the kind of resolution of that book because it's interesting, and I'd love to hear your perspectives on that. So let's go from a Brooklynite, Ben Lerner, to a Dubliner. Let's get into Sally Rooney and Intermezzo. Intermezzo is the 4th novel by the Irish author Sally Rooney. It was published in the fall of 2024. It's set in Dublin and rural Ireland, and the novel follows 2 brothers after their father's death. Ivan is 22 years old and a former chess prodigy, and his older brother Peter is 32 and a human rights lawyer. Peter is in love with a younger woman, Naomi, but he still harbors feelings for his ex-girlfriend, Sylvia. Sylvia and Peter broke up after an accident left her severely injured and unable to be intimate. Naomi is a younger woman, 23, and she struggles throughout the book to support herself and relies a lot on Peter's generosity and assistance. Ivan, on the other hand, falls in love with an older woman, a 36-year-old Margaret, who he meets at a chess tournament outside of the city. Their relationship is something they keep hidden, despite its beauty and how they clearly blossom both emotionally and sexually. The story's conflicts are largely internal, so each brother is really managing their grief over their father's death. And his passing has made them question how they live their lives and think about how they want to live in the future. There's also a lingering bitterness between the brothers, and throughout the book, we see them grieving alone and utterly unable to share vulnerabilities and move forward together instead of apart. After a series of chance meetings and arguments, the brothers work through their feelings and open up to the possibility of living in ways where they could get their needs met and connect authentically. And the end of the book has the brothers agreeing to attempt to reconcile based on Margaret's insistence. So Rooney developed this story from an initial scene that she wrote of a chess exhibition at an art center. And she drew inspiration from her own experiences watching chess tutorials during COVID-19. And I was thinking a lot about the title of this book. I've been thinking a lot about titles in poetry in regards to my own writing and thinking of how excellent Rooney's title is here. It really does two jobs at once. Intermezzo means an unlikely move in chess, or it also means an unusually brief interlude or diversion. And in the case it's usually used, it's talking about a musical piece. But I think in this instance, this book is clearly about this moment in the brothers' lives where they both have a chance to change the course of their lives or to make a diversion. And also to make moves that seem unlikely and put them out of their comfort zones. And I was thinking a lot about this theme of when life makes a turn or when you have to make big decisions and how those in your life affect those decisions. So I really like how she puts both of the brothers at a place where they need this despite their age difference. And I think the age difference in this book is a genius way to demonstrate a lot of the hypocrisy within their conflict. But this idea of this theme, when you're at a point in your life when you need to change things and you need to change course, this idea of diversions, is this something that was on your mind when you both read the book? Brian, how about you?
Not explicitly, but now that you're talking about it, it's interesting because I'm thinking about it a lot with regards to the book. I think a lot that was on my mind when I was reading it was both how grief kind of spins your world completely out of control in a way that even if you connect with someone who has gone through similar grief experiences, you're never fully on the same page. It's such an isolating experience in a way that I think only adds to kind of the trauma of the experience. Um, but then also this like larger question that the book continuously explores of what is a proper social norm, and are social norms, do they exist for any good reason other than just to kind of hold people back? Um, that like I kept going back and forth with those two kind of feelings throughout the book, and every time a decision would be made by one of the characters, or something's further revealed about their relationships with both each other as well as significant others, um, this sense of like, well, if we could just drop the charade of social norms, like what is right and wrong here in this sort of situation. Um, so I think like that goes hand in hand with kind of what you're talking about, but also like just a slightly different takeaway. How about you, RJ?
Well, I just want to say, just I read this last year, and Brian is usually the one with the list, but can I just tell you guys, I don't think I'm ever going to have as great of a reading year as I did in 2024, because this ended up being like my third favorite book of the year. But my top 10 of last year was Bee Sting, Safekeep, Intermezzo, James, Northwoods,
Jeez.
Beautyland, which I don't think you guys have read yet, but you
Mm.
should. Wellness by what's his name? Nathan Hill, I think. Martyr, Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, and then Table for Two by Amor Tolls. And then the number 11 was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is also an awesome book. Like this was just an absolute wealth of. But the
Yeah.
fact that this was like my third favorite book of the year, I mean, I don't even know what I was actually thinking about while I was reading it, because I was so like in love with the writing. Like
Yeah.
there's like a delicacy of language that she has, even when talking about like really intense interpersonal stuff and describing sex and arguments and money and chess, and like the way that she writes is just, I mean, I was like totally transfixed the entire time. And so I think like the plot and the themes even were just like, I didn't really care what it was about. Like it was just like the writing had me so like under, I was just like, yeah, I was just mesmerized the whole time. And I can't remember another writer who's written as like delicately but convincingly about so many things. Like the Safekeep is kind of
Mm.
similar, I think, in the way that she writes, although Safekeep is a little more like hard edged in terms of how she writes in a good way. But this, I mean, I was just amazed, and I hadn't read any other Sally Rooney, so maybe that's why. But I was just like amazed by the writing the whole time. So I don't think I was really thinking about the thematics, although the dynamics between the brothers, it was a little bit like the bee sting in that you're like, if you guys could just like stop being assholes to each other, like it would just be like way easier, you know?
Yeah,
So like if,
absolutely.
right, if like one of them would have just done something different many different times, then like they could have all like everything would have been different and they could have handled it totally differently. So I
Yeah,
didn't really
I
answer your question, but that's like
no,
how I
it's
answered.
helpful. I mean, I think like what both of you are saying in different ways hit me. In regards to what you were saying, RJ, the way that she writes is my favorite thing about this book as well. The way that she uses different voices so well. I was reading another book and then I went back to prepare for this episode and I opened up and read a little bit of it. And I was like, she's just on another level. I think she has an intimacy when she writes that is you can't teach that. I don't know if it's because she's Irish, but she has this warmth to her. And in the same way that the Safekeep is fascinating intellectually, but has a colder distance, but she has like this warmth to her. And she, all of the sections are in close third person, but she varies the rhythm and style for each of them. So each character has a totally different rhythm and feel to them. So, like, Peter is very crisp and staccato and direct, but still like wildly descriptive. There's a moment when she describes Peter smiling at his wrist instead of at her. And I just felt like that says so much about that character. And it's such a clean descriptor, which is amazing. And then for Ivan, his syntax is much more measured and complete. And you get that feeling of someone who is more methodical and contemplative. And the book, I think she's an expert dialogue writer, very little punctuation in her book. And the book has just this amazing flow to it that I agree. I think she's is really gifted writer.
Insanely gifted writer. I mean, when I picked the book up, I was buying it in my favorite bookstore in the world. And it was the day after I finished Dream State, which is a book we'll hopefully talk about on this podcast because
Yeah.
there's no book this year that I've read that made me feel more while questioning choices that the writer was making. I genuinely love that book. It will probably end up in my top 5 for 2025 just because of the
Wow.
way that book made me feel. And so I was on that like reading high and, also fear of like, is the next book going to be as good? The next book I read after that was The Blind Assassin, which we talked about
Start.
earlier. Which I got a ton out of, even though it was perplexing
Mhm.
in some ways for me. And then I picked this up, and I was reading it, and I was just immediately that feeling that you got opening the bee sting. Northwoods similar in this sort of way. Orbital for me, the Safekeep, another great comp. Um, where you're like, I've never read an author writing in this sort of manner. Um, and I think she's on a completely different level than pretty much anyone that I've just listed in terms of form and in terms of like technicality. Like she writes in a way
Yeah.
that is very difficult to do, and I think for a certain type of reader is probably very difficult to read. The lack of punctuation, this very clear, like she's in a completely different voice for each of her characters. And then when she writes about them together, there's like a acrobatic and just technically skilled nature to it. It's almost like listening to progressive rock where you're like, cool, this
Mm-hmm.
is a riffy rock song, but then you like add all more that's in there, like within each second. Like it's like listening to like early like Gabriel Genesis, where you're just
Mm.
like, okay, I hear the song, but also you decided to add all these other ideas within there that fit within. It's almost like reading David Foster Wallace, where you're just like you're getting everything, and reading that requires quite a bit of attention. But the thing that she masters in this book is character development superseding any sort of real need for plot outside of like
Yeah.
this entire
Yeah.
book takes place in like a 3 week period in time after 3 or 4 week period in time. I think that's it. After the two main characters' father passes away. Um, you just are you're just diving into the way that these characters think and feel and explore the world and understand the world and interact with each other in a way that makes that writing style make complete sense, because without that you're not going that deep in their heads.
And I
Yeah.
can I just add something to Brian to what you're saying, which is like
Always.
one to that point. Like you won't learn anything about chess in this book at all.
No.
Right?
No.
Like so like
No. No.
it's not even really part of like which doesn't matter because the like you said, Megan, the title has many meanings, but it's just like there's not a lot happening besides what's happening inside, you know, inside and between the few characters, which I think is personally like I said, I loved it, but it's interesting. There's not really a plot.
Yeah, there's the plot is and the plot points are fairly contrived, particularly in the second half of the book. Like once Naomi moves in to Peter's dad's house, it just starts to be a little like and everybody just happens to like run into each other at all these
Mhm.
moments. It pulled me out of it a little bit.
Mm.
And I do think though that her character development, like you're both saying, is and her books live in someone's interiority. Like that's what she's a genius about, I think. And my only other exposure to her has been something that I'm always talking about, which is her show Normal People, which
Mm.
they adapted from her novel, which I never read the novel, but the show is just about these two lovers and their inability to be together and also their inevitability of being together. And it is totally takes place within their own minds and hearts. And it is so rich and well acted because it's Stacey Edgar Jones and Paul Mescal. So it's perfect. But I think the way that she writes about love is really, really modern and really special. You know, I think she talks a lot about what love is and how it shapes our lives, and also the thrill and complication of sex and the complexity of like erotic desires. I think she writes about sex really, really well. There's that line that Ivan says, "Is this what it feels like to get what you want?" That I just feel like is so unbelievably mind blowing and perfect. And I read this review and it was saying that she's really great at invoking loneliness. And so when she writes about love, it feels like a salve. And I thought that was really beautiful because I think she is really great at evoking a sense of how alone someone can feel. And when I think about this book, I think about a really rainy street that the sun never shines on. And it's really sad. And you're kind of just, crunched under your umbrella and your shoulders are up. I feel this book feels very, cold and rainy in that sense. But then she has this like rich inner warmth to everyone. And I think she's just really great at doing that.
Yeah, I mean the scene early on between Ivan and Margaret when they end up back at the place he's staying for the chess tournament and they end up sleeping together. Like we're getting into like descriptions that like um typically wouldn't go that deep into eroticism unless you're writing smut literature. And yet she avoids it feeling that way. And like it feels deeply human. It feels deeply personal. It feels um like an evening like that would, in such like a human way. Um, there's like a level of excitement, and there's also fear, and there's like loneliness in that moment described between both characters, but also connection that is on just a completely different level than what I've like I think the only thing I've read that um discusses, an evening like that this year was in the Safekeep.
Yeah.
And this, like, the Safekeep kind of gets into the beauty of two people that are so misunderstood and don't even understand each other finding each other. This gets into kind of like uh the grossness of like fluid swapping that comes with this, like in a way that is so personal and so like elemental. Um that I was like, I was hooked, like, from that segment on. I was like, "I'm gonna tear through this book, because if you can describe this in this sort of manner, I'm gonna ride out this book, no matter where it goes, no matter what you stop, where you stop, where you end up, bringing us in these people's lives." I felt like her level of description and ability to get in people's heads in very personal situations was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, and I'm here for people writing about sex in a real way
Yeah.
and not feeling embarrassed or ashamed about that. Like, it is such a huge part of everyone's interiority in their lives, and I'm just confused as to why people feel like they can't write about it. So, thank you, Sally Rooney. Thank you, Yale Vanderwooden from the
Mhm.
Safekeep. Thank you to these brave women. Thank you, Annie Ernaux, for women for writing about this. Maybe men are doing it too. I don't know. I have to look into that.
Yeah, I think some are.
I hope so. They should
I
be.
think they should be.
I mean, uh, there's some great stuff in the bee sting. It's just slightly different from this, but definitely, we're just gonna always reference the bee sting.
I
Yeah,
know. Someone made a comment online that someone messaged me and was like, "It's really funny that you all think the bee sting is like the gold standard because I didn't even like that book." I'm like, "Well, we did.
yeah,
Clearly, we talk about it nonstop on
it's
this
definitely the gold
podcast.
standard for me.
It really is." Well, I have a question about this, the ending of the book, because I felt a little bit like this is the second book I've read within a calendar year where the ending was just polyamory and then everything's great. So, like, I'm just a little it pulled me out a little bit, and it felt a little bit of like an easy answer to a lot of complex stuff that she was getting into, and I was wondering what you both thought about the ending.
I'm curious. I want to hear what RJ says, because I'm there with you to a degree. But I know, RJ, this was your third favorite book of the year, which to me would mean the entirety of the book
Yeah.
was like worked for you. So why don't you make the case for the way that the book wraps up, like maybe the last 100 pages, and then I can jump in.
Well, I think that yeah, I mean, like the fact that the spoiler alert, the brothers, like reconcile, right, in some way. I think that the polyamory thing, I think, is oversimplifying a little bit because of how complicated the situation was between Peter and Sylvia,
Hmm.
right? Like that I thought was like really although I do think this is a common thing, and I think that's maybe what brought the overall score down on Goodreads, because it's a lot lower than I would have expected. But um the fact that like the complications between the two of them throughout the book I thought were like really well done, even though I don't know, it's just like a really strange um situation that Peter is in with Sylvia, right? Like just
Yeah.
her illness and her suffering and their like complex kind of relationship on again, off again. But clearly she is like the one person that he can go to. There's like something really complex, I think, between the two of them. I mean, like the throwing the younger woman in there is maybe strange, but I think the dynamic between the two older, between Peter and Sylvia, right? Is that Sylvia?
Yeah.
Sylvia Naomi is a
Like-
younger girl.
Yeah, like that's just really like well described, I think, in a way that shows people who can't even really have their needs met in the way that they want because of like physical limitations and probably emotional scarring and all that. And that combined with like the grief that he's going through after losing his father is like, to me, that all was really convincing. So I guess I
agree with
didn't
that.
yeah, and I wasn't really like, again, I wasn't really like bothered by the end, but mostly because I wasn't really in it for the plot in the first place. I didn't really want the book to end. I wanted
Right.
her to just like keep writing about like what happened after this, and then until all these people die and other people were born, and just like keep going for like
Yeah.
thousands of pages. But I wasn't bothered by it. I think mostly because I think the relationship was portrayed in a really authentic way, so it didn't feel cheapened by that ending.
Yeah, I definitely bought what happened. Um, you felt reading through a lot of the book this sense that you get when you're in a fight with someone that you really love, where you're so desperate to like make your fucking point because you're in the fight. You already have like said things that you probably regret, and you've heard things that hurt really deeply. And so if you're gonna go through that pain, like I better as well make the point that I'm trying to make about why I'm angry at you. And you better understand this point. But then at the same time, you have this like sense of like, okay, well, how long is this going to drag on for? Like at some point, one of us just needs to like be the bigger person and be like, okay, let's put an end to this. And so you get this sense towards the end of the book that like Peter, as the relatively more mature, grown up one, realizes like, okay, I'm going to go to my brother's chess tournament because I've clearly not been involved with this. And then him meeting Margaret there made sense from a plot standpoint. And them realizing the similarities that they both have in terms of their own attraction to the people that they're attracted to. Um, I did take some issue with the we'll just make it work as a three-person couple between him and Sylvia and Naomi, only because it did seem to a degree like it just kind of happened. Like Sylvia almost just gave up and realized, like, well, I do love this guy, but like I'm gonna have to let him be with someone else so he gets his needs met. That felt less complex than the book had presented it initially, and I think that was a little troubling. I mean, for me, the the interesting thing about reading this book beyond what she actually wrote was for probably the first 300 pages, I was like, this is the best book I've read this year. This is a 5-star masterpiece. And then it dropped to 4 stars for me by the end because I think to your point, RJ, I didn't want it to end. And maybe it's the Irish thing. Maybe it's the super messed up family dynamics. But the closest comp I can make to this book is the bee sting. And the thing I loved the most about the bee sting was as you went through that book, it just kept getting wider. Like it was almost like a balloon that just kept getting more and more inflated. And this felt like you were inflating. And then it just kind of stopped and started just like very quickly deflating on itself. And like, I don't mean that in a, they just like it found the conclusion very quickly in that sort of way and wrapped things up. So I feel like if you're going to introduce a book that dives this deep into people's heads in a very raw and emotional point, just keep that going and just keep like, I don't typically say this, but I think this book could have been up 100 to 150 pages more to service the back end of it. I think that was like my biggest technical critique, even though for the most part, I loved this book.
Yeah, and I think that Naomi is the only character whose perspective we don't really get in the book, and I think she's
Yeah.
a little thinly drawn, and I think that she's also painted a little, not in the most attractive light as in terms of, like, her intelligence or her capabilities, and I think that it made the end feel like confusing as to why Sylvia would want to like be involved in that or be okay with that. And I just didn't get it. But I think that one thing that I really loved about the ending is this idea of she has this line at the end that says, even to think about it is to live. And she's talking about how we improve upon life just by thinking about the gray areas within morality, between hate and love, and how familial relationships can be so mixed up with those two feelings, and how bad and good can be kind of difficult to discern depending upon the context. And I think that her willingness to dive into that is really, really interesting. And I enjoyed that about the ending.
I also think like if this was a Philip Roth book or something, like the ending would be so much less acceptable. But the fact that it's like a woman writing about it, like the guy kind of like gets, and I agree, like both of those
It's
women,
what he
you don't
wants.
really,
Yeah.
and you don't really know either of the women. They both seem kind of slightly one dimensional, but like again, like I was blinded to that part. So I don't contest what you guys are saying, but it feels like it's interesting that she kind of gave him what he wanted.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I think this book really is strengthened by the fact that she has two male protagonists, and that the relationship between them, even though this book is so much about love, is such a big part of the book. I think that was really smart and added a lot of depth to the book.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. Go ahead, Brian.
I was just gonna say it's interesting that like the one issue I think some of us have with the ending is almost like found in the origin story for the book. Like she started writing about that opening scene and then realized that Ivan needs a brother and he has a brother. And she realized that through writing this, that like she'd hit dead ends. And so she introduces a brother into her overall story who then has essentially two girlfriends. And those three characters to me, like where I found myself most enthralled with this book were the Ivan and Margaret scenes because I
Yeah,
felt like their
same.
relationship was fully real. Ivan's pain was across every page and wasn't just losing his dad. It was the type of person Ivan was and the way she described him. And it's not really a character that I feel like you read about as a protagonist. And that love that he felt with Margaret and like his just knowing from the start that like this is okay regardless what society says, and the two of them working together as they figure out is this okay. I thought that was the most compelling part. And but she's from a structural standpoint realizes I need this other character to broaden this story, and that other character has an ending that is like in a lot of ways a pretty sweet ending for him without a lot of drawbacks that I don't know how realistic that is, which when you're writing this much realism, I had like a slight issue with, but RJ, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. There's so many quotes from this book that I want to read, but I think we can just tell people to read it. But I think that the what's the brother's name? Sorry, not Ivan, but the other guy.
Peter.
I think the Peter parts. He's such a miserable person that it kind of strengthens the Ivan character because he's so. Well,
Yeah.
he's so different, but he's also like you can tell what Ivan has gone through without Ivan really talking about it, just because of the way that
Totally.
Peter is developed, which I think is really smart. It's not like Ivan's really grappling with how he's treated by his brother. You just know because of the way that the brother is kind of portrayed, which is I think really interesting. And that to me, that's what made that part when he comes to the chess match and meets Margaret, like that was much more powerful because you kind of like so much was not told to you, but you figured out. And I think that's just like it's just an awesome writer,
Yeah. She's very good at that. And I think, yeah, she does character development through relationships which is just next level.
Yeah.
We've talked about a few comps. Are there any other books or movies like this that you'd recommend, either of you? We can't say the bee sting because we've already said it too many times.
From a movie standpoint, it's not the exact same, but I would recommend Ordinary People from 1980, which
Mm.
dives into family drama around um, a traumatic event that impacts the son in the family and um,
Oh, I like
what
that movie.
what impact that
Mhm.
has on the parents, and it kind of gets into the properness of suburban middle class existence. Uh, the combo of what's proper versus what is like actually human, what is actually like felt in this moment. Um, Similarly, a bit more abstract and a bit wilder, but I just watched Magnolia, which showcases a family as a father is dying and how it's impacting all members of the family. Um, I'm looking through my overall list here, but those are kind of the initial movie recommendations I would throw out. What do you guys have?
Well, I just want to do this mostly just to make Megan upset. I want to just if we want to talk about a book that has complicated sibling relationships and something traumatic that happens to the father in the family, I would go back to Long Island Compromise as a as a completely different
Yeah.
completely different take on this. I mean, coming at it from a complete opposite side.
Well, in the same light as that, I was looking at I was rereading the New York Times review of this book, and they were like, if you like this book, you should read this book. And the list was The Topeka School, The Idiot by Elof Bodeman, which I did not like, and Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck, which I also did not like. All of those
Wow.
books get a lot of praise, but it was just hilarious because I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. But I also think that All Fours is an
Mm.
interesting book to read about interiority and modern love and complexities within relationships. And I also think that Annie Ernaux's her memoir, The Young Man, is about her relationship with a younger man, and it is absolutely thrilling. And Annie writes, I think Annie is definitely an inspiration for Sally Rooney, I'm sure, because the way she writes is so direct and emotional and honest. And I think they share a lot in common in terms of the way that they write.
Can I just say, I think we've talked about this before, but All Fours is up there. It's in my top 5 of the year so far this year. I think it's so awesome.
Talk about
I love that.
readable. I mean, we should
Love that book so
definitely
much.
talk about that book probably on
Yeah.
this podcast.
Yeah.
It's very important to the zeitgeist right now, I think.
Yeah. Really great.
I'll add it to the list. I'm going to add another movie on here that we talked about actually on this podcast. But as we continue to talk about this, I think there's a lot of parallels, and that is the wonderful, controversial Mountains May Depart, which
Mm.
highlights foreign culture. It highlights grief, sadness,
Mm.
evolution. It highlights interpersonal relationships. It highlights age differences within a relationship. All of which I thought was presented really beautifully on the screen, and I would recommend anyone out there to check that out
I love
if
it.
they like Intermezzo.
Yes,
Love it.
I think that's a good comp.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
What we like that. This is like, I swear, this is like Megan saying that we don't like the Lakewood Ghost.
Yeah, we
Fair.
liked
I don't
Mountain
want to go
Depart.
down. I don't want to go down
Di-
that road.
we did like
I liked
that
it.
movie, Brian.
I
We
liked
just
it.
had things that we thought about it as well, opinions.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're taking it so personally. I love that. Well, the good news is that next week we're going to be talking about a story that no one can take personally because we're going to have the author on. So, we're going to be talking about
No one.
Temple Street by RJB, and pretty excited to get into that next week. So everyone can read this story between now and then. So we're going to be pushing this out on our socials. And if you're interested in following along with what we're reading, you can go to osirispod.com/podcasts, click on a library card, and you'll see the link for our schedule for this year. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate all the support and engagement. It's been really fun to hear from you and hear what you're enjoying about our show. And we'll see you next week for Temple Street by RJB. So thanks again and happy reading.